If the New Orleans Saints want a running back that can operate in place of Alvin Kamara, in tandem with Alvin Kamara, and in the future after Alvin Kamara, Tony Pollard is the option. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to take a look at what the New Orleans Saints have done so far to trim the salary cap. We're also going to be breaking down keeping Ronald Curry on the Saints coaching staff, why that's so important, and another member of the coaching staff that is expected to be retained now. But first, we're taking a look at getting you all caught up. Really, it's all throughout this episode. We're taking a look at getting you caught up on everything you might have missed throughout the week. So we're going to start off with one of the biggest stories this week that's kind of come from over the weekend as well, and that is what's going on with New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara. So with Alvin Kamara, his trial is now, or his hearing is now finally over, and it's now set for a court date. So he goes to trial on March 2nd. This could end up ending in Alvin Kamara being suspended for at least 6 games next season in 2023, depending upon what happens to the legal process. Once that all wraps up, then the NFL will, hand down its discipline after that. But they won't do that until after the legal process is completely done. So that will leave the New Orleans Saints for potentially 6 games or more, according to the NFL's code of conduct policy when it comes to violent acts, things like that, with a big time hole at running back. And honestly, even if the Saints had Alvin Kamara for 17 games next season, there's still a hole at running back in terms of who it is that partners with him. So I've got the perfect fill-in for somebody that's not only going to be able to replace Alvin Kamara in the games that he would be out, who would also be able to operate in tandem with Alvin Kamara when he is back, but could also solidify the Saints' future at running back for another couple of years. And that is soon to be former, hopefully, Dallas Cowboys running back Tony Pollard. Now, Tony Pollard's contract is expiring here after the 2022 season. Once he is done with that deal, he will become an unrestricted free agent unless he resigns with the Dallas Cowboys. But how far can the Dallas Cowboys go? How far does Tony Pollard want to go? There might not be a lot of interest there. According to SpotRack, who is part of the cap sort of area when it comes to or a website covering salary caps across all leagues, they have the market value for Tony Pollard set at $9 million per year, a projected contract out on the market being 3 years, $27.1 million, which would put him 8th amongst running backs with that contract. That puts him in a situation to where he is $2 million above James Conner, $2 million above Leonard Fournette, $5 million under Aaron Jones, $5 million under Nick Chubb. So that's kind of the neighborhood that he would be in with that. If I'm the New Orleans Saints, I'm more than willing to spend $9 million a year, not all of it guaranteed, of course, only a certain percentage of it would be guaranteed, on a running back like Tony Pollard, who has done some remarkable things in the NFL, despite the fact that the Dallas Cowboys just seemingly refuse to fully commit to him. And I think some of that has to do with the money that they kind of blew in the Ezekiel Elliott contract and all that. But if you look at his wear and tear, quote unquote, over the past couple of years, he had his first 1,000-yard season last year on just 193 carries. He had 130 carries a year before that, 719 yards, went over 100 carries in 2020 with 101, only 435 yards that season. But he's also catching passes. He had 3 receiving touchdowns last year, 39 receptions the year before that, 28 the year before that. So if you want somebody that can run all over the place, you want somebody that can be impactful in the backfield as a receiver out of the backfield, who draws a lot of attention from defenses, is versatile and skilled enough, has good enough hands that you can motion him out wide, get him matched up with a linebacker and watch him tear him apart in the short area of the game, and then be able to sort of sub that out in and out with an Alvin Kamara oh my goodness, Tony Pollard is like the perfect build in terms of what would maximize the New Orleans Saints offense. Now, the Saints offense would owe it to themselves and to Tony Pollard also to maximize Tony Pollard. So we can't end up in December hearing, coaches talk about how they need to figure out creative ways to use Tony Pollard. You've got to know that right off the bat, but hopefully that learning curve or that hump, whatever that was that the Saints had to get over last year with Alvin Kamara, is over and done with. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that Tony Pollard right now, who is just wrapping up this past season at just 25 years old, he's a little bit younger, not by much, couple years, but a little bit younger than Alvin Kamara. And Alvin Kamara, of course, seeing a lot more wear and tear over the course of his time in the NFL. Alvin Kamara has been steadily over 100 carries since he came into the NFL in 2017 and has gone over 200 carries twice. Tony Pollard has never been asked to do that yet in his NFL career, go over 200 carries in a season. Alvin Kamara just wrapped up his 2022 season at 27. By the time that he gets back on the field in 2023, if that suspension is at the beginning of the year, I think you're going to need somebody that's probably going to be able to come in and give this offense a little bit of a boost. And I think that Tony Pollard can be the guy to get that done. He's very unheralded. He's somebody that doesn't get a lot of shine because of the fact that he has been sort of in that rotation with Ezekiel Elliott. He was a Pro Bowler this past year. But when you look at sort of the awards and things like that he's pulled together versus the awards that Alvin Kamara has pulled together, Tony Pollard, very unsung. And I think that would change if he got an opportunity to be the focus in an NFL offense. And the Saints may have the space and capacity available to do that and could potentially turn to a Tony Pollard in the coming years once contracts are done with AK, once AK is no longer in New Orleans, whatever it might be that ends up eventually being the end of Alvin Kamara and the New Orleans Saints, which you have to assume at some point is going to happen with Tony Pollard. You'd be able to carry that on. Now, don't mistake what I'm saying here. I'm not suggesting that the New Orleans Saints might move on from Alvin Kamara here in the 2023 offseason. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about 2025, 2026, when things are all down the road and you're potentially looking at either having a 27-year-old running back or a near 30-year-old running back, and you might have to make some tough decisions in that case. And that's where a guy like Tony Pollard, if you can get him in on a 3-year deal, ends up saving you from having to make that decision because it's built in, it's baked in, and you're ready to go with your offense. So if the Saints want to find somebody that checks all the boxes in terms of replacing Alvin Kamara while he's gone, working in tandem with Alvin Kamara when he's back, and potentially replacing Alvin Kamara when he's gone years down the road, Tony Pollard would be the most immediate and very easily successful option in this year's undrafted free agent running back class. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look at retaining Ronald Curry, why it's so important for New Orleans, the brightest minds and young minds on the New Orleans Saints coaching staff, and another coach that they ended up keeping in the building that can be very vital to their success in 2023 as well. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market. Head over to Built.com right now. Do it. It's fine. It's okay. You can do it while you're listening to me, as long as you're not driving, or while you're watching, you can open it up in another tab. Built.com. Do it. Maple donut flavored protein bar. What more do you want from me? What more could I possibly do for you than to tell you that there is now a maple donut flavored Built bar that you can have right now, just by ordering it over at Built.com. Why are you still looking at me? Why are you still listening to me? Well, you should be listening to me because I'm telling you about the Built bar, but don't look at the podcast screen. Don't look at that. Go to Built.com, buy the dang protein bars because you know you want them. Maple donut flavored protein bar. As a matter of fact, I'll be right back. Okay, I've ordered my Built bars. I did it at Built.com, but you don't have to always do it on Built.com. You can also head over to your local Walmart, go over to pharmacy section. You get a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, and coconut puffs. If that's not enough for you, if you got a Sam's Club near you, go over there. You can get that Baker's Dozen 13 box on some hit flavors with brownie butter or brownie batter and churro. Don't worry, you can thank me later. And you can thank me for those maple donut Built bars that you just ordered as well. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Hey, the New Orleans Saints kept a member of their coaching staff. He didn't get poached by Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. Take that, Sean. Appreciate you as always. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. So when it comes to one of the big moves or some of the big things that we knew were going to be taking place over the course of the 2023 offseason. My light is freaking out. Here we go. Over the course of the 2023 offseason. Now I look all washed out. I look like Nat King Cole in the 50s. Hold on. I got to bring this down a little bit. It got me lightening up over here. So, sorry, that was internal monologue and I said it out loud, and I'm going to keep it because we're family. So, one of the big things that we knew we were going to be watching over the course of the 2023 offseason is how many of the New Orleans Saints coaching staff members were going to potentially be poached over to wherever Sean Payton landed. And we saw a little bit of it, right? Zach Strief headed that way. Declan Doyle headed that way. But for the Saints, for the most part, they've been able to keep that staff together. Now, Ryan Nielsen went elsewhere, went to the Atlanta Falcons. The Saints parted ways with Chris Richard. That was a decision, not him being hired away by somebody. Corey Robinson did not come back. He allowed his contract to expire. Again, that was a decision, not him being poached away by somebody. So the Saints so far have done a pretty good job keeping their staff together. And one of the most recent ones, as we continue on with In Case You Missed It today, is that they did not lose quarterback coach and passing game coordinator Ronald Curry. This is a guy that for years and years and years, even down to just last season, right? Pete Carmichael telling me that he believes that it's only a matter of time that he's ready, Ronald Curry is, to start calling plays, things like that. Although Pete Carmichael will continue to call the plays here in 2023. He's a big piece of what it is that the New Orleans Saints do. And I've had a lot of people push back on me about that. And I get it, because a lot of the stuff that Ronald Curry has done kind of goes unseen because it happens in the practice facility. It happens, within the team facility and stuff like that. So I completely understand. But when you look at him helping to get the best season out of Jameis Winston's career in terms of that 7-game start in 2021, getting 4 different quarterbacks that year ready to start, getting 2 different quarterbacks this year ready to start, getting a really good individual season out of Andy Dalton, even though Andy Dalton couldn't get the Saints in the end zone and fell apart in the red zone. He still got a very efficient season, a high passer rating season, all of those things. Put up some of his career best numbers with the New Orleans Saints working with Ronald Curry. And so at some point, something has to be credited to Ronald Curry, right? I know there's a lot of people who are saying, well, the Saints have gone 9-8 and they went 8-9 and all these other things, or 7-10, but that's not really on Ronald Curry. And so if we want to put that on, I'm sure. But then when you have quarterbacks that go out there and against all odds are able to start games, play games, and in many cases, or in some cases, win games, you have to give Ronald Curry a little bit of that credit. Now, we haven't been able to see if Curry will be able to develop a rookie quarterback. That's the one kind of big remaining thing. He and Ian Book came in at the same time last season as, that quarterback coach role, or in 2021. But we got 1 year out of Ian Book. He got 1 year with him, so we haven't been able to see. I think it's imperative that the New Orleans Saints draft a running back in the first or second round, get a first or second round prospect in this year's draft. And then maybe at that point, we'll get an opportunity to see what Ronald Curry can do as an artist or as a coaching staff member that is a developmental artist. Like, that's a big thing that you're looking for and that you need on the New Orleans Saints staff one way or another at some point. So I'm looking forward to seeing if the Saints are going to do that and how that tandem ends up working out. Ronald Curry and a very talented rookie quarterback. Not that Ian Book isn't talented, but he's not Hendon Hooker. He's not Anthony Richardson. He's not Will Levis. He's not those guys that are in the NFL draft that are potentially reachable for the New Orleans Saints. I'd even put guys that I'm low on, like Aiden O'Connell and others, to have a better shot over a longer period of time in New Orleans. And who knows, maybe Ian Book would have had a better shot over a longer period of time, but we won't know that. So right now, when it comes to Coach RC, it was a great thing for the New Orleans Saints, at least to be able to keep him online, because not only could he potentially turn into that quarterback developer or prove that he can be that guy, he could be the Saints' next offensive coordinator. And so having somebody that's in-house and ready to go is imperative. And it also gives you a mid-season backup should you decide to change play callers during the 2022 or 2023 NFL season. Expect him to not call 1 preseason game this year, but 2 preseason games this year. And then so it gives you a little bit of a security blanket in case things aren't going the way that you need them to go with Pete Carmichael next year, in case we don't get Pete the Drip Carmichael and instead we get Pete Carmichael, who was in 2022. Now, Curry's also one of the brightest young minds on the staff. Between him, linebacker coach Michael Hodges, who is also being retained this offseason, and wide receiver coach Cody Burns, you have a really, really stellar group of young coaches. Oh, and now you can add Marcus Robertson to that list over with the DBs and others as well that come in and are able to really help you turn your organization and make sure that it's getting new ideas, that it has this influx of new ideas, new principles, and new play designs, things like that. Like thrusting your organization into the future and keeping it there is very important. These young coaches help you do that. And even some not so young coaches, right? Maybe older coaches that are coming in, but that are bringing in new ideas to the organization. All of that very vital. All of that very important. But to have guys who have institutional knowledge and are going to be bringing you new ideas, that's exactly what you need on your staff. Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints have been able now to maintain several of those guys. And the Saints were not only able to hold on to Ronald Curry this offseason, they also look like they're going to be holding on to running back coach Joel Thomas. Joel Thomas is somebody that I have said maybe you give the running back coordinator, run game coordinator tag to keep him in New Orleans out of fear that he might get some interviews elsewhere. Remember last year he was interviewed by his alma mater, Idaho, right? The Vandals, same place that Caden Ellis graduated from, New Orleans Saints linebacker. Who, by the way, great interview with him and Chris Risvoglu over at Straight Up Saints. If you haven't watched that, go and watch that or listen to it. Joel Thomas also got an interview with the Arizona Cardinals as offensive coordinator, right? So again, Joel Thomas getting a lot of attention. Now, the Arizona Cardinals have hired their offensive coordinator. It is not Joel Thomas, so the Saints are going to be holding on to him, but he becomes very important because of the fact that you have a group here where you've got the Alvin Kamara question. You're going to need to see what you have in Eno Benjamin. You're going to need to potentially go and grab some young running backs, maybe a free agent running back. So Joel Thomas becomes a big part of getting those guys implemented with institutional knowledge of the offense and how to work potentially in place of, as well as in tandem with Alvin Kamara, as opposed to a new running back coach with no institutional knowledge, trying to figure out the balance between Alvin Kamara and these other players. Joel Thomas will have a very good understanding of what that is to look like, assuming Alvin Kamara gets a suspension and returns in 2023. So some good news on the New Orleans Saints coaching staff to not lose those guys to the Denver Broncos or elsewhere. The Denver Broncos look like they may have hired their offensive coordinator in Joe Lombardi. We'll see if that's the role that they hired him for. Jeff Duncan over at NOLA.com reporting that the Saints were interested in adding Joe Lombardi. They don't have a quarterback coach position available. They don't have an OC position available. So maybe it was, an offensive assistant, maybe an analyst role, something like that, or a senior offensive assistant. Could have been any of those things, but he's going to be hanging out with Sean Payton in Denver instead, while the Saints holding on to some very vital key coaching staff members. Coming up next, we'll continue in case you missed it. I know it's Mardi Gras week. You might have missed a little bit of the news. Don't worry about it, though. I got you covered. We'll get you through all of the big salary cap moves that the New Orleans Saints have made, now nearly halfway trimmed from the roster overages that they started with. How did they get there and what's next? We'll break it down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode brought to you by friends over at Ultimate Pro Football GM. I told you about the best protein bars earlier. Now I'm telling you about the best mobile game ever invented. You know that other game that's got franchise mode and that doesn't pay attention to it anymore and won't give you what you need and what it is that you're looking for. You can't do coordinators. You can't manage the salary cap accurately. You can't do any of that stuff. This mobile app does it all for you. And best of all, it's free and entirely available offline. You don't have to be connected to anything. 5G, 4G, 3G, 2G, 1G, LTE, Wi-Fi. You don't have to worry about any of it. You could be on a plane in the middle of the sky playing this game and you don't have to wait for a thing. It's that awesome. And I love it because you get to do all that stuff in terms of hiring coaches, coordinators, medical staff, sports psychologists, all of this. You get to draft players, scout players, sign players, manage the salary cap, whole bunch of stuff, upgrade facilities. It is endlessly deep, this game, and it's entirely free to play. No waiting periods, no timeouts, nothing like that, and entirely offline. So if you want to check them out today, head over to ultimate-gm.com to get started, or you can search Ultimate Pro Football GM in the App Store today. Don't forget to use the promo code Locked On so you can get a 100% free boost to your franchise. Again, that's promo code Locked On for that 100% free boost to your franchise over at ultimate-gm.com or search the App Store for Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints as we wrap up In Case You Missed It, which we'll do every week on Fridays to get you caught up with all of the big stories from the week and make sure that you're up to date with everything going on with your New Orleans Saints. That's my promise to you here on Locked On Saints. So the Saints have started trimming their salary cap, and they have pretty much gone about it the way that we expected them to go about it. Most recently, the Saints restructured the contracts of Ryan Ramczyk, saving $10.336 million. They also came to a renegotiated deal and agreement with kicker Will Lutz, dropping his base salary and saving $1.5 million. There are some incentives that will allow him to earn that back, but the way that the Saints went about this was very, very smart and very, very proactive in terms of making sure that they knocked down some of the salary cap, kept Will Lutz around, but also left their options open should they hold a competition over the course of training camp. They've also hit the contracts of guys like Erik McCoy, as well as Marcus Maye, and now they've gone from being $60 million over the salary cap to somewhere around $35 million over the salary cap, which still puts them at the second lowest on the roster, second lowest in the league, with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers still around $55 million at the moment. So for the Saints, they're starting to chip away. They're nearly halfway there. Now, they have some easy moves that they're going to be able to do, but I want to highlight once again the pay cut of Will Lutz, because what this effectively does is saves the New Orleans Saints a chunk of change, $1.5 million, and also puts them in a situation where if they wanted to bring somebody in to compete with Will Lutz over the course of training camp, then if they move on from him, there's no extra money that they kick down the road. There's no new money in terms of future years or anything like that they would end up taking on in terms of dead cap. That's why this was a smart move by the Saints. And it's a smart move by Will Lutz as well, who knows that the 2022 performance probably isn't representative of who he actually, not who he is, but the type of player that he is. We know that Will Lutz is a very, very good kicker and has been throughout his career, but hasn't had the greatest last couple of years since that injury that sidelined him for the entire 2021 season. And so what did the Saints do? They gave him the incentives so that he can continue to build up back in that. As soon as we have detail on those incentives, I'll make sure you know them. As of right now, we don't have them yet, but that's okay. They'll certainly be coming. Now, easy moves remain for the New Orleans Saints. They can pretty much execute a certain collection of maybe 4 of these moves and end up being salary cap compliant. Yeah, they're that close already. If they either restructure or cut, remember when it comes to cutting, you want to do a post-June 1 cut here for Andrus Peat. They could do that and then end up saving money. That way, if they restructure them, they save double digits. If they cut them and designate them as a future, designate them as a post-June 1 cut, then they would end up saving, again, double-digit millions of dollars. So they're in a very, very good space in terms of what they would be able to do there. The thing to keep in mind when it comes to the post-June 1 cuts and post-June 1 transactions is that you can only do 2 of them before June 1. So it's not a situation where you can just say, after we're going to cut you, but we're going to designate you as post-June 1. We're going to cut you, but we're going to designate you as post-June 1. And we're going to cut you and designate you as post-June 1. That's not a very likely scenario for the New Orleans Saints. And you can't do that in the NFL anyway. So what you would have to do instead is cut them with that designation, but you can only do that twice. Now, remember, if you do that, you still have to carry the salary cap hit until they're officially off the books on June 2nd. So it doesn't immediately provide you with the relief that you need right now in terms of getting under the salary cap by the beginning of the league year on March 15th. So if you wanted to do something that would immediately be beneficial for you, then you restructure Andrus Peat. If you don't want to restructure and guarantee money in the future to Andrus Peat, then you would have to literally wait until after June 1 in order to make that cut, or designate him as a post-June 1 cut, plan for that money to come off the books in June, but know that you would still have to get more money off the books here before then. Ways to do that: restructure Marshawn Lattimore. That'll save you double-digit millions. Restructure Cam Jordan or extend him. That'll save you quite a few. You can extend Carl Granderson. You can extend David Onyemata. You can restructure Tyrann Mathieu. You can either cut Jameis Winston right now and save around $5 million, or you can designate him as a post-June 1 cut, save $12.8 million. Again, you'd have to wait for that to come off the books, though. So the Saints have a ton of moves that they can still use to get under the salary cap without having to really make too much of a fuss about it at all. And that's sort of what we expected when it came to the New Orleans Saints. Yeah, they were $57-60 million over the salary cap, but they have over $150 million or nearly $150 million of funds that they can make by simply restructuring contracts. Now, you don't want to do that and open up that amount of money and go $100 million under the salary cap, because then you're screwed in the future. But for the Saints, who are sort of managing things as they go, trying to get under this salary cap and have the money that they need to be able to go and sign a quarterback, build around a quarterback, all of that, then that ends up helping you out quite a bit. So the Saints right now, $35 million-ish over the salary cap. A simple restructure to Marshawn Lattimore will save you around $10.7 million. Cam Jordan, in terms of an extension renegotiation, they could save $10.6 or more million. They could go to Alvin Kamara for a restructure as well. That would save him around $7.5. Taysom Hill is still an option. Demario Davis is still an option. Tyrann Mathieu still an option. So there's so many different ways that the Saints can open up these funds. So expect it to be, no pun intended, but a fun next couple of weeks as we continue to watch all these salary cap moves get made, restructures get made, and everyone go, how are the New Orleans Saints getting away with this? Because they do this every single year. And speaking of, when it comes to salary cap, so that it's not just me telling you, right? I'm going to have Brad Spielberger from PFF as well as Over the Cap come on the show on Tuesday for No Cap Tuesday. He's going to join us and talk about why the New Orleans Saints aren't going to see the salary cap catch up with them, so you can stop saying it, other people, haters. So we'll get to all that on Tuesday, but Monday is Mock Draft Monday. So we'll take a look at what it would be like if the New Orleans Saints decided that they were in love with Hendon Hooker and decided to take him at 29 so they can get the 5th-year option on him. We'll explore why that would be a good choice. We'll explore why that wouldn't be a good choice, and we'll take a look at what they could do from that point forward. So we got a lot coming up for you here all throughout the rest of the offseason here on Locked On Saints, as there is no offseason here on Locked On Saints. We live your team every day, and I'm glad that you can be here for it. I appreciate you so much as always. Make Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day for your second listen. Make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson as well as Keith Sanchez, as they are bringing you everything you need to know about the draft prospects here in 2023. Not a little bit, not some, everything you need to know. So head over to Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Appreciate you as always, making me part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi, especially if you're out at the HBCU Legacy Bowl game on Saturday. Myself and Darian Gray of Locked On HBCU will be out there, so make sure you say hello. And as always, if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up, let me know how the family's doing, let me know how you're living, let me know how your mom and them, and trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.